You nervous for your first hot yoga class? I was nervous for mine. It's totally normal to be nervous about trying something for the first time. If you want to actually see inside a class, head on over to our website or our YouTube channel so that you can take a look at what it actually looks like in the class. Sometimes that'll help you to allay your fears. Most of the things people are afraid of when they first start is that they're going to puke, pass out, or maybe even die during class. The good news is you have nothing to fear. I've got a few tips for you today that'll help you thrive in your first hot yoga class. There's two main stereotypes for who passes out in a hot yoga class. And I have to be honest, in 15 years in business, I can count on one hand the number of people I've seen pass out in class. If I totaled up all the people I've heard of at my studio, we'd still be under a dozen. So less than once a year somebody passes out in class. It's really not that common. So who is it passing out in class? Number one, young, very thin women who haven't had anything to eat. They'll start the class, and usually after the first or second backward bend, they come up with low blood sugar and will awful crumple right down to the ground. First things first, your body is a machine, and the fuel for that machine is food. If you have a super sensitive stomach and you're taking your first class in the morning, put something in your stomach. It's okay if it's just fruit juice or something light and easy to digest, but your liver can only store 12 hours worth of glucose. Once you've utilized all that glucose, or if it's been more than 12 hours since your last meal, your body will begin to decompose and metabolize itself. How do you feel when you start to decompose your own muscle tissue to create energy? You feel dizzy and nauseated. The second stereotype is someone who hasn't had a lot to drink. One of the few men I've seen pass out in class told us after class that in the last 72 hours, the only thing he'd had to drink was 1 bottle of Mountain Dew. Hey, that's not enough fluid. If you're trying to figure out how much you should drink a day, you don't have to pound water. You certainly don't need to drink a gallon of water a day. In fact, you don't want to drink a gallon of pure water. Take your body's weight as a rough estimate and cut that number in half. You should be drinking about that many ounces of water per day, every day, no matter whether you're working or not. So someone that weighs 150 pounds, start by trying to consume 75 ounces worth of water a day. If you drink a lot of caffeinated beverage, try adding an extra 8 ounces for each caffeinated beverage you drink. Now this is a rough estimate. Once you're drinking around this area, you can just drink to thirst. If you're drinking way under that, you're going to have to work on it. In fact, a study about 10 years ago showed that 60% of Americans mistake the sensation of thirst for hunger. So we've been stuffing chips in our faces when what we really needed was a nice cold drink of water. One last thing I want to make a note of is electrolytes, because most of us don't even know what they are. Your sweat isn't just water. It's also composed of lots of different salts, including the electrolytes like potassium, sodium, magnesium, manganese, copper, and lots more. So when you sweat, you're also sweating out these electrolytes. And if you sweat regularly and a lot, you're going to crave more salts and you're going to need more electrolytes. Now, we sell a really awesome electrolyte supplement here at the studio. You can get electrolyte supplements anywhere, and you can get those same type of electrolytes and micronutrients in things like sea salt or kelp. So we just want to make sure that when you're thinking about rehydrating, you're not just pounding water. Okay, so you had something to eat, you hydrated well. Listen, the fluid you drink about 2 hours before class, that's the fluid you're going to be using in class. So don't think that you can pound a half a gallon of fluid in the parking lot and feel good, or that chugging a gallon of water during class is going to feel good. Nobody wants to work out on a full stomach, so just sip a little bit of water during class to keep your whistle wet. Eventually you'll notice that you don't need that much in class. So, here's where we got to get real with each other. When you do your first yoga class, most of us feel a little disappointed in ourselves that we're not total champs right off. If you come to your first class and you try to go like summer sessions trying out for the high school football team, you're going to die in there, especially if you haven't been working out in a long time, or if this is a really different workout, or if you've never done anything in a heated environment. So one of the most important things you can do to make sure you have a great first class is to take your time and go slowly. In every single class you take, there's going to be people who are crushing it, people who are struggling, people who are recovering from chronic illness, and people who are taking care of themselves. You actually show your prowess as a yogi by how well you can take care of you. And some days that's going to mean pushing yourself and going hard, but other times that's going to mean skipping a set and sitting down and having a sip of water. So when you come to your first class, the most important things you can do to feel good is to come well hydrated and well fed, and just take your time and feel it out. That way you can thrive in class. So now here's the moment of truth. Are you going to die in there? I have to tell you that I've never heard any stories except one about a man who died in Bikram yoga. It was a very windy November day in Vermont, and the winds were whipping across Lake Champlain, and overnight They blew out the pilots in the heater. So in the morning, the teacher came in to teach the 8 a.m. class, and the studio was cold, and they weren't using the normal heater, they were just using the regular ambient heat to try to get the room up to temperature. By the time they started class, it was about 80 degrees in there, so not hot for a Bikram yoga class. Well, a young woman had finally dragged her boyfriend, who was 27 years old and had an undiagnosed heart condition, to class with her. A few postures in, at 80 degrees, he dropped dead, his heart stopped beating. Luckily for him, he was practicing right next to an EMT who did chest compressions until the ambulance got there. They revived him at the hospital, and his cardiologist said to him, "You're so lucky that you went to yoga today with your girlfriend, because if you'd stayed home, you would have died alone, no one would have resuscitated you, and you wouldn't be here today." So, the moral of the story is, if you want to live, you better get to yoga.